Hello, Kim here at Olive City Oasis in Northern California. It is the end of the first week of September, and for the first time in so many months, it was slightly cooler today. I think it only got up to about 88 or 89 degrees Fahrenheit, and now at about 7 p.m. there is a slight breeze, just ever so slight, but it's enough to make it really pleasant to sit out here and chat. In my comment sections on my videos through all these months, and now just as a few weeks ago, 4 years on YouTube, I'm always getting questions. Even on some of my very old videos, I still get questions, and I try my very best to answer every one of them. But sometimes, frequently even, those questions are something I think other people might be interested in. So I'm definitely going to be going back through some of those older videos and older questions and seeing if I think they might be of interest to other people too, because if so, I will go ahead and answer them here so that everyone can benefit from them. So before we get into the questions, I thought I'd give you a little update on what's going on around here. Yes, it is September, and though I'd love to think of it as fall, and I sort of pretend to, it's not really. Officially it's not until the third week of September, but also around here, it doesn't cool off, more than a day or two here and there until the end of October, maybe the beginning of November. But I've still got my fall decorations out, and I am still starting to enjoy baking with pumpkin and spices again. And yeah, I'm pretending it's fall. And I have some exciting things going on this month and in October. In a week, I'm taking my two youngest, my 18-year-old and my 21-year-old, to a steampunk festival nearby. Well, it's about 2 hours away. Last summer, we went to a steampunk festival and had so much fun. So we're definitely looking forward to doing that again. It's a different festival, so there'll be different booths and different costumes and different events, and it's just really enjoyable and different. So if you've never been to one, I highly recommend you try it out. And then a week after that, a couple of my older kids are coming to visit for my birthday. Yeah, my birthday is coming up toward the end of September. I'm going to be turning 59, my last year, my 50s. And so they're coming to celebrate. That will be cool. And then in October, another one of my adult kids is coming from farther away. She actually lives in Hawaii, and she's coming for a visit in October. And also in October, I'm heading to Ashland, Oregon for a 4-day cozy mystery festival. And it's for authors and readers, and has all kinds of fun, cozy, mysterious events, and I'm super looking forward to it. I love Ashland. I used to spend quite a bit of time there, and so I haven't been there for a while, and this event is going to be such an interesting and relaxing break from, the summer of gardening, which I love. I'm sure you do too, but, toward the end of it, it does get a bit overwhelming, and you're sort of ready for a change. And so this will be a nice break toward the end of October before true winter gardening, which I do very little of around here since I have so many perennial veggies. And it'll be a nice break before that, gets into high gear. All right, now for the questions and answers. Now, 2 things up front. 1, if you notice that my background looks a little sloped, a little lopsided, or maybe I look a little lopsided, I don't know. I try to keep myself straight, but I actually garden in my backyard on quite a bit of a slope. My entire 2.5 acre property is actually on a slope, and my house is toward the very top of the slope, and then it goes down, and my fruit orchard is down at the bottom. My olive orchards are both to the north and the south of me. And yeah, my veggie garden is behind me and to the west and to the east. So you're not imagining it. There is a diagonal slope behind me. Secondly, and much more important, I want to reiterate, as I've said many times in my videos, I am not an expert. Anything I say about gardening is simply from my own experience, what's worked for me, what hasn't worked for me, and from my research. I love doing research, both in person with, really experienced gardeners and arborists, and online with reputable sources. But things are different for everyone, everywhere. And so if you don't agree with me, that's fine. You need to do what's right for you. I just encourage you to make sure that if you're doing your own research, make sure your sources are highly reputable and can be corroborated with other experts. Of course, a lot of things in gardening, like in life, just vary from person to person, place to place, and year to year. So there's that. Now, the first question that comes up a lot, and that I actually am going to ask of you as well, is how to handle gophers and moles, voles, but mostly gophers. I have had them come into my veggie garden for the first time this year, actually coming up in a couple of my raised beds. Yeah, that was so shocking to me and so disheartening. I've never had a gopher issue in my vegetable garden. I've seen evidence of gophers way down in the bottom fruit orchard area, but nothing to any great degree, nothing to cause any big problem or whatever. But yeah, this year, for the first time since I've moved here, there have been gophers coming up here and there. Well, not the actual gophers. I haven't seen the gophers, but I've seen the mounds of dirt they leave behind. So I have not done a lot so far to deal with them because I'm not really sure what to do. I know the typical advice, but I'm already doing that. I have planted long ago, when I first put in my beds, whether raised beds or in ground, whether hugelkultur or containers, all the veggies I grow and the perennial greens and my fruit trees, everything, I have strongly scented plants such as lavender, thyme, oregano, garlic chives. I'm probably forgetting a few, but I have these types of very strong aromas that most rodents, most gophers do not appreciate, do not like, and that's supposed to help keep them away. Well, it has until now, but now maybe they've gotten used to them. I'm not sure, but so that hasn't worked. In some of my beds and around all my fruit trees, I have proactively put in hardware cloth around or under, but not in all of them. I didn't think of it for all of them. I didn't know about it before I made some of these beds. I have one in-ground bed that they just decimated. It's the only one they actually killed any plants, but they decimated the entire bed. The only thing that survived were some garlic chives at the very front of the bed. So I'm going to be redoing that bed. I've put it off all summer because it's going to be a pretty big job and because it was too hot all summer to tackle that kind of job. So now that fall is here, I'm going to be redoing that bed. And the plan is to put down hardware cloth beneath soil and compost. Make sure to plant some strongly scented plants around it. But I don't know that that's going to be enough. And you know what? The only thing I can find online, the only thing other than what I've already said, is to try to trap them, to put actual gopher traps in the holes. This kills the gophers. I mean, you can't catch and release anyway, and I can't really imagine that with a gopher anyway. But I am also just not going to kill the gophers. I understand that some people need to do that, especially if they're growing commercially and their livelihood depends on it. But mine doesn't, so I'm just not going to do that. So, do you have any suggestions that have worked for you or someone you know that are different than what I've just mentioned? If you do, please tell me in the comments below. All right, let's move on to something I actually have an answer for. This is probably one of the most common questions I get asked. And I get asked this question about all sorts of trees, but most commonly I get asked it about my strawberry trees, my Arbutus unido and my Arbutus marina, There's also a few others that I grow and several others that are available. But the two most common are the Unido and the Marina. And they all have this, I wouldn't call it an issue or a problem, but this phenomenon happen from time to time. And for me, it's annual, I would say. And I think it probably is for most arbutus trees, but also for many, many other trees. Citrus, I know, usually has this going on, but from what I have read, a lot of trees do. So I'm talking about evergreen trees, I suppose, because deciduous trees losing their leaves wouldn't face this phenomenon. And what is that? It is yellowing leaves. Now, I'm not talking about yellowing leaves that happen from overwatering or underwatering, because that can be the cause of yellow leaves, or from over fertilizing or under fertilizing, because that also can cause yellowing leaves. I mean, too much sun or too little sun can also cause yellowing leaves. There are differences in the consistency, the texture rather, of those leaves. If it's too much sun, those leaves are going to be brittle or leathery if it's crisp. And if it's too little sun or too much water, they're going to be soft and limp, But the yellow color can be caused by any number of things. It can be caused by some nutritional deficiency, but again, that's usually a lack of fertilizer, lack of nutrients, or too much. So there's an imbalance. But what if you have, gone through and analyzed, and none of those reasons are what are causing your tree's yellow leaves, as far as you can tell? Is there another reason? Does this mean your tree has a disease? Does it mean the tree is dying? Well, as I always reassure people, after asking them a bunch of questions to clarify it's not one of these other things, most trees, including the arbutus trees and most citrus trees, they actually have another reason for going through a phase of yellowing leaves, often once a year. And that is that it's just a cyclical thing, a life cycle thing. And as new growth is ready to come through, the plant makes way for that by shedding some of its old growth. And usually the way it does that is they turn yellow, those leaves fall off, and the new growth emerges. Another time this happens is when you take a tree, like recently my blood orange trees that I got at the beginning of summer, and you transplant them from the pot they were in into a bigger pot or into the ground. Or you take a tree you bought from one area, one climate, and bring it to your own somewhat different climate. My area is always hotter and drier than anywhere else around here. So, that change sometimes will cause shock to the tree for a while, a transitionary shock, whether it's a transplant because you're actually, replanting the tree, or even just a shock to its system because of a change in climate. And so you might lose suddenly a bunch of leaves that turn yellow and then drop off. But as long as there is new green growth coming out on your tree, you really don't need to worry. If there's new healthy green growth coming on, then your tree is going to do fine. So that is my answer. I know it seems simplistic, but this happens every year with my arbutus trees. And now, I'm not saying the whole tree does this. All the leaves don't turn yellow and fall off. But, I don't know, I've never counted, but probably 15 to 20%, something like that, will, over the course of a few weeks, turn yellow, drop off. But there's always new growth at the same time, simultaneously happening. And so I know it's fine. So I just try to reassure people, yes, check that it's not all these other things, but be aware it could just be the life cycle of the tree. Something that I think a lot of people are either unaware of or unfamiliar with is how rootstock can trick you, how it can try to take over some of your fruit trees. So most fruit trees are grafted. The variety that you want, that you desire to get a certain kind of fruit from, is grafted onto the rootstock of another variety because, say, it has traits that are really good as far as, being, say, resistant to certain diseases, and maybe it's a dwarf rootstock or a semi-dwarf, so the tree's going to grow smaller than normally it would if it was a regular variety. Generally promoting better health and growth to the tree will be the traits that the rootstock is chosen for, developed for, and then the variety that's grafted onto that rootstock is all about the fruit and all the desirable elements we want included in the fruit. The thing is that underneath the ground, that rootstock is usually quite strong, quite resilient, and quite eager to grow. So if you're not careful, what happens is suckers grow up from underneath the ground or even above the ground, but below the grafting point. And I think this is where most people get confused. They think that rootstock suckers only come from under the ground, but actually many trees' grafting union is quite high up on the tree. Not always, but many times. And any growth that comes from beneath the graft union is a sucker from the rootstock. And rootstock growth is much more vigorous than the growth you're going to get from the fruiting variety. And so it will try to take over the tree. Back in May, one of my daughters who lives in the Bay Area of California sent me some pictures of all the fruit trees that she had discovered were growing in her front and backyard, the house she rents. And she was super excited, and I was too, because there was a lot of great fruit trees there. But then she sent me this one picture, and she says, I can't figure out what's going on with this tree. It's like a second tree is growing up it. And I looked at it, and it was really clear to me just because I've been around this, but she's never grown any fruit trees before, so she had no idea what was going on. But it was a nice healthy lemon tree with fruit on it and growing right up, almost winding itself in and out amongst the lemon tree's trunk and branches were rootstock branches growing up from the bottom, and they were full of thorns and so vigorous. Now, citrus can grow thorns on any of its branches, not just from its rootstock, but if it's growing from the rootstock, it's definitely going to be having some thorns, some really strong, dangerous thorns. But yeah, I went ahead and went over there and just chopped all that out. Well, not chopped. What did I do? I pruned, I clipped. One of them was so thick I had to use my Sawzall though. But yeah, we took all those out. And when you let it get that overgrown, as the owners had with that tree, the suckers can take over. The rootstock can drown out the actual fruiting variety, and you might not even get it back. So you really want to keep up with it. If you just pay attention to your trees, you'll definitely notice the sucker growth coming, whether it's from under the ground or just lower down on the tree beneath the graft union. And if you catch them early, you can just break them off with your hand. They're real soft and flexible. But if you let them get really big, you may end up having to do what I did and saw them off with his Sawzall. Or worse than that, it could just decimate the tree and you lose all the fruit. You don't want that. Can you guys hear that? One of my pet peeves is cars that think they're in a drag race out in the countryside or on your residential road. I do not understand the appeal. Another question I get asked all the time, and I just got asked it the other day on one of my older videos about growing a strawberry tree, an Arbutus unido or Arbutus marina. Usually people don't ask this question about the Arbutus trees, but they ask them about a lot of other trees, fig trees, mulberry trees, just all kinds. But this person wanted to know about the strawberry tree, and so I thought, that's a good question that probably a lot of people have, and it's super important for everyone, even people that don't garden. If you live in a house with a yard or even an apartment where you have not a balcony, but like a little courtyard garden, you might benefit from knowing about this. And that is tree roots. The problem of tree roots, because some trees have such aggressive root systems. We all know, we've all seen the damage, what they can do. They can rip up the cement. They can wind their way around your pipes, your plumbing under your house, your sewer pipes, the septic system. They can actually, some trees, their roots can actually damage the foundation of your house. Yeah. So you really need to know before you plant trees, or if you move to a place that has a bunch of trees, you need to know, Are these trees going to cause that kind of damage? Recently, I did a video about my little back patio garden, and I showed a volunteer mulberry tree that had come up in a crack in my patio. Not a crack like the cement crack. This was designed this way, where they put those thin pieces of wood in between squares of cement. And so over time, that wood rots and plants come up through that, usually just weeds or grass, but this was a mulberry tree. Now, I have a lot of giant mulberry trees on my property. Probably, 20 or more. I've never really counted. And most of them are male, gorgeous shade trees, and they also provide a lot of fodder, delicious, healthy, nutritious fodder for my sheep. But they are super aggressive as far as roots go. Their roots, mulberry tree roots, just suck the water up. They're super competitive with all the trees and plants around. It's one reason why I have a lot of container plants here and a lot of raised beds, and why I don't plant directly in the ground near my back fence where I have a couple of huge mulberries. And in a recent video, I cut that little volunteer mulberry down because it was really worrying a few of my subscribers. They were, just concerned that I didn't realize what that could do to my house. Oh, I know. I know, but I was having fun for a few weeks, just enjoying the fact that it just came up there, was providing a little shade to my other plants that I had in containers there. But I just moved a few what did I put over there? Oh, my Owari Satsuma mandarin trees over there. And they did the same thing, but they're in containers. And even if they weren't, citrus is not going to be a problem for you as far as roots go. But there are other trees besides mulberry trees that can cause big problems with your foundation or your plumbing under the ground, your sewer pipes, even just cement sidewalks. And what are the worst culprits as far as tree roots go, being invasive? Probably the worst by far are willow trees. Now, not every single variety, but most willow trees just suck the water out of the ground. So if you've got other trees or, a garden nearby, those willow tree roots are going to come right on over and steal all the water. Plus, their branches break really easily, so that's not good to have next to your house. You end up with broken windows, or maybe it might, if they get big enough, it could damage your roof. But yeah, their roots, if they're anywhere near your home, can get under there and cause problems. Or if you've got a septic line, they can wind themselves around those pipes. So willows, very bad. Another super bad one is eucalyptus. Now, eucalyptus are very fast growing, and I love the look of eucalyptus. We have them all over the place in this area, and they, volunteer. They spread very easily. And so they're always coming up right on the edge of my property, so that when I drive down my driveway and I go to get on the road, if I look to the left or the right, it seems like every other month there's eucalyptus trees growing. I've got to get my Sawzall and get out there and cut them out. They love the water. They will search it out wherever they can find it, and they can cause a lot of problems. What are some others? River birch, American elm, a lot of kinds of poplars, and probably the worst fruit tree of all, because most fruit trees aren't a problem with roots, not at all. But one that really is, mangoes. If you love mangoes and you want to grow mangoes because you live in an area, zone 10 say, that can do that well, either do it in a super huge container. I think I've used the word super about 85 times, so I apologize. Either use a very big container, or make sure that the mango trees you plant are far away from your house and any septic or sewer lines. One tree people ask me about frequently, I think I mentioned before, is figs. This is kind of, I wouldn't say controversial, people don't argue about it, but you will find different answers about this if you try to research it. You'll find some people saying, oh yeah, those are super invasive. I said super again. And you'll find other people saying no. A lot of arborists say, no, figs are great. They have, not just shallow fibrous roots, but they don't spread that far, so it's not an issue. The fact is there's a few varieties of figs that are more invasive than others, so I'm guessing that's where the disagreement came in. I grow a lot of figs. They grow really well in containers as long as you pot them up. If you can't pot them up, if they get to a certain place where, like, I'm not going to pot them up after 15 gallons. So at that point, after several years in a 15-gallon, you're probably going to need to take them out, trim their root ball, and put it back in, because you don't want them, the roots to be circling around and around in the container. But I haven't had any issues with fig trees in containers. And in the ground, they're fine too. Like 90% of them probably aren't going to give you any issues. So when you get a fig tree, just look up the variety and see if it, says, oh, by the way, this is one of those fig trees that does have rather invasive roots. Then you're going to want to plant it far away from your house. Now, there are some trees that are great for planting near your home that you absolutely don't need to worry about. I mentioned most fruit trees, especially plums and apples and crab apples. But there are just decorative ornamental trees with gorgeous fall color or beautiful spring blossoms that are fine to plant near your home and aren't going to cause any problems to your pipes or your foundation or your cement walkways. Some of those trees are the arbutus strawberry trees. They have no problem with their roots being an issue. The crepe myrtles, citrus, dogwoods, so gorgeous. Weeping cherries. Now, they get rather tall, so, you might not want to have them right next to your house because of that, but they don't have a root issue, and they're so beautiful. What else? Chinese pistache. Now, that tree is one that I have been craving to get. I am going to be on the lookout for that this year because the fall color it gives is out of this world. Japanese maples. Eastern redbud, and surprisingly to me, oak trees. Yeah, who knew? Don't have an issue with invasive roots. So there are plenty of trees to choose from. You just need to do your research before you plant. One question that I have gotten 6 or 7 times over the last few years is how much mulch should I be putting down around my fruit trees? And the common advice is about 2 to 4 inches. Because if you put more than 4 inches, you might be blocking the water from getting through to the soil underneath. Now, I would suggest experimenting with this and seeing how it works for you in your particular situation, because it really depends on what kind of material you're using for your mulch. Some of it's going to be allow water to transfer through it much more easily than other types. So I actually use a lot more mulch than that around my fruit trees. And if you're trying to drown out something, to suffocate out something, I guess is a better way to put it. If you've put down cardboard and you're wanting to pile on mulch to kill off unwanted weeds, well, then you put on as much as you want. When I pulled the cement up from the basketball court we had here years ago to put in my garden originally, I also piled the mulch very deep, about 2 feet deep in most areas. Why was that? Because I wanted to build up the soil. I wanted that mulch to slowly decompose and create nutrient-dense, rich soil, which it did. But if you're just mulching your veggie beds or some young fruit trees, you don't need to put that much. 4 inches is more than sufficient. But less than 2 inches, it probably is not going to do much good. It won't retain so much moisture, and it won't be blocking out the weeds very well. After a month or so, it might even just wash away. One thing, though, with mulch that I always emphasize and you really need to be careful about is do not put mulch up against trees. Whether it's a new tree or an old tree, you don't want to do this. It's very bad for the tree, can cause root rot and all kinds of bacterial issues. So keep mulch about 6 inches away from your tree trunks. If necessary, and it often is, especially with young trees, put some sort of wire cage like hardware cloth around the trunk, a good distance out, so that the diameter of that cage is about 4 to 6 inches. And that will keep the mulch away from it. I found that works really well. 2 more questions. One I've gotten frequently is, do I think you need at least a couple of acres? Like I said, I have 2.5 here, to actually have enough land to put in a fruit and nut orchard and a good-sized garden. And I have to say, no, I don't think you need a couple of acres. I don't even think you need 1 acre. I think if I just had this backyard, which, I mean, I didn't measure for you. I'll have to do that sometime, but it's just, the size of a good big backyard. That would be more than sufficient for me to have a big garden and to have I could easily have 40 or 50 fruit trees back here. One of the problems is people think there have to be a huge amount of space between fruit trees because we've been conditioned. We've seen commercial orchards. If you live somewhere like I do in California, you see them just driving up and down the freeway all the time, but you've seen them on TV, you've seen them in the movies. Commercial orchards, and yeah, their trees get huge because they have to produce a huge amount and they have the equipment that lets them do that, and their trees have to be 30, 40 feet apart. That is not only not true for a home orchard, but it would be highly inadvisable. It would be a complete waste and create a lot more work than necessary. Your trees can be very close together. They can be 4 to 6 feet apart. Some people even very successfully plant 2 or 3 trees in the same hole. That's a whole nother thing. But the fact is, you're going to be keeping your trees much shorter. You're generally 6 to 8 feet tall, so they're very easy to harvest. And so they can be planted very close together. You're not going to let them get that big. They don't need the root space. They don't need as much water. Backyard orchard culture is quite different. So even if you want to plant an orchard, you don't need even an acre. The only time you might need more land, well, you would need some more land, is if you're going to be getting animals. And I would not include chickens or ducks with that because they don't need that much space. I mean, my chickens appreciate the olive orchard that they run around in, but you don't need that. But if you're getting something like sheep or horses, well, then, you need some more land. But still, probably not as much as you think. And the final question, and I still get asked this a lot, probably because I keep mentioning it, because it is always on my mind, and that is, am I still planning to move? And if so, when? And the answer is, yes, I am still planning to move. I am very much hoping to move. I am very much thinking that would be a great thing for many, many reasons, which we can talk about another time. But, because I don't want this video to be an hour long. But I am. But it's probably going to be a couple of years. And I know I said that a couple of years ago. But at that point, I was thinking, my youngest will graduate from high school. That would be a good time to make the move. But 2 things. One, I've decided actually it'd be better to wait till my youngest graduates from community college. At one point, they were thinking of going straight to a 4-year school, as some of their older siblings did. But turns out it's much more economical and also just better for many other reasons to go to community college first and then transfer if they want to do that then. So it'd be very nice for me to stick around, provide home, be around my kid, get to enjoy them more, and let them graduate from community college before I decide if I want to move on out. And the other reason I've put off moving for a couple more years is, I'd just like the housing market to settle down. I think it will be better for me. I'll have a chance at more buyer interest if the prices aren't quite as high as they have been, because I already have a few obstacles to overcome when it comes to selling. The top one being I'm in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, that's the reason I've been waiting, and the reasons why I would like to move, because a lot of people say, why would you want to move? You have the perfect climate and the perfect setup, and don't you love it there? Yes, I do love it here. And I love everything I've been doing here. It's been wonderful the past 11 years. However, I don't love the climate anymore. And that is one of 2 or 3 big reasons why I want and really need to move, is the summer climate has become just too hot for me. as someone who wants to be out in nature all the time, growing in it, yes, of course, but also just enjoying it, it's very difficult to have to go from June through September feeling like I can't leave the house. I can't step outside the door from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. So, yeah. Thank you for sharing your time with me this evening. If you have watched all the way to the end of this video, I am very much impressed, and I consider us good friends. So thank you again, and I will see you again hopefully very soon. Have a great week.